Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with a sentence that might sting a little. You're not failing, you're lying to yourself. And now let me tell you something even more unsettling. It's not failure that's holding you back, it's the story you've created to explain why you think you failed. That narrative, that inner monologue of self-pity and excuse-making, it's not just misguided, it's dangerous. Because real failure, when it's honest, when it's faced with open eyes and open hands, can actually be the most productive, transformative thing that ever happens to a person. But deception, especially the kind aimed inward, well, that will rot your potential from the inside out. I've spoken to countless people, young and old, students, professionals, parents, even the so-called successful, and there's a pattern. People walk around in circles, exhausted, not because they're overworked, but because they're overwhelmed by the weight of their own dishonesty. They haven't failed, not really. They just refuse to call things what they are. They've confused delay with defeat, discomfort with destruction, and most dangerously, they've mistaken self-pity for humility. But there is no virtue in lying to yourself about the nature of your struggle. In fact, it's pride masquerading as surrender. It says, look how much I've tried, but what it really means is I don't want to look at what I've avoided. You see, when you're honest about failure, you begin to see it for what it is: specific. It's measurable. You can point to what went wrong. You can analyze your habits, your mindset, your structure. But when you lie to yourself, failure becomes this shapeless fog, this mysterious force always working against you. That's convenient, isn't it? Because if failure is vague, then so is responsibility. And if no one's responsible, especially not you, then nothing has to change. But life doesn't work that way. The longer you lie to yourself, the more reality rebels. You'll start to feel the effects in your relationships, your work, your mental health. You'll tell yourself, I'm just tired, but you won't admit what you're tired of. You'll say nothing's working, when in reality, you haven't consistently done anything for more than a few days without undermining it with doubt or distraction. And here's a brutal truth: there's no breakthrough without clarity. If you're wandering around in the dark, but refuse to admit you're holding the flashlight, then of course you're going to feel lost. But that's not the world's fault. That's yours. And the minute you admit that, the game changes. You start to reclaim your strength. You start to see the lies for what they are, not reflections of your reality, but defenses against the truth. What kinds of lies exactly? The ones that sound innocent but are soaked in defeat. This is just how I am. I guess I'm not meant for this. I'll never be good at that. These statements sound passive, but they're actually aggressive declarations, aggressive toward your own potential. Every time you repeat them, you reinforce a distorted view of yourself. And worse, you build a version of your future that conforms to that distortion. Let's say you're trying to build something: a career, a marriage, a healthier body, a meaningful life. That's not easy. And sometimes you hit a wall. That's normal. But what happens next is everything. Because if you hit that wall and tell yourself, I guess this isn't for me, then the wall wins. But if you stop and say, okay, why did I hit it? What wasn't working? What did I avoid? Where did I slack? Where did I lie to myself? Then you turn that wall into a map, and that map will take you somewhere real, somewhere better, somewhere earned. The world is hard. Life is full of chaos and setbacks and unfairness, but none of that gives you the right to shield yourself with dishonesty, because you'll pay for that lie. Every day you wake up and pretend that you're powerless. Every time you convince yourself that you've already done enough when you haven't, you're not protecting yourself. You're cutting off your own oxygen. There's a kind of psychological decay that sets in when people live too long in dishonesty. They stop trusting themselves. They second-guess every decision. They procrastinate. They isolate. And the tragic irony is that the more they lie, the more they feel like failures, even when the failure isn't real. Because guilt has a voice. It doesn't go away just because you ignore it. It leaks out in anxiety, in resentment, in cynicism, and eventually it makes you bitter. You'll start to resent people who are doing well. You'll call them lucky, you'll call them fake, but what you're really doing is punishing them for making the effort you're too afraid to make. And this isn't about perfection, by the way. This isn't about doing everything right. It's about the direction of your life, the alignment between what you say and what you actually do. That gap, the one between your intentions and your actions, is where the lies like to live. And the only way to shrink that gap is to shine a light on it and tell the truth. So tell the truth. Admit when you're lazy. Admit when you're scared. Admit when you've taken the easy way out, even though you knew better. Because that honesty is painful and it's sacred. It's the soil where real change begins. Without it, you're just decorating the prison you've built. You're rearranging the furniture in your own stagnation. But when you stop pretending, when you stare your excuses in the face and call them lies, you can finally begin to move. Not perfectly, not all at once, but forward, always forward. Stop lying to yourself and watch how quickly things begin to shift. People are so afraid of failure, they spend their lives trying to avoid it. But failure isn't the real threat, not even close. What really damages you, what corrodes your soul over time, is self-deception, that quiet, internal betrayal, the willingness to look directly at the facts of your life and turn away. That's what breaks people down. Not failure, not mistakes, not even pain. It's the refusal to confront what's true. Because here's the thing, failure is precise, it's contained, it happens in time and space. You try something, and it doesn't work. Maybe it stings, maybe it costs you, but you know where it began, and you know where it ended. You can study it, learn from it, you can re-engage, you can get better. Failure, when faced honestly, is one of the most efficient learning tools we have. But self-deception, that's not a single moment, it's a slow spiritual erosion. And worst of all, it wears the mask of safety. People convince themselves that they're doing fine, that their choices are justified, that their weaknesses are fixed, immovable aspects of who they are, and so they shape a version of reality that asks nothing more of them. It shields them from guilt, from shame, from the brutal weight of their own potential. But that shield comes with a price, and the price is truth. And without truth, nothing meaningful can be built. Let's say you tell yourself, I'm just not good at relationships. Maybe you believe that. Maybe it gives you a strange sense of comfort. It lets you off the hook. But what you're really doing is protecting yourself from the reality that maybe your relationships are a mess because you're selfish, or lazy, or you don't listen, or you avoid difficult conversations, and those things are fixable, but only if you admit they're real, only if you're willing to pull your ego out of the driver's seat and take a hard look at who you are. You see, the danger of lying to yourself is that you slowly become incapable of seeing where the real work needs to be done. You tell yourself you're tired, but you're actually just uninspired. You say you're overwhelmed, but you're just disorganized. You say you're stuck, but you haven't taken a real risk in months. And over time, those lies add up. They become your operating system. You run your life on them, and they make you miserable. The most terrifying part of self-deception is that it feels like truth. You repeat something enough times, and it becomes part of your identity. I'm a procrastinator. I'm not creative. I don't have what it takes. These aren't facts. They're conclusions you've drawn to avoid doing the harder work of becoming something more. And here's the really dark part. If you repeat them long enough, you'll build a life that matches them. You'll sabotage opportunities. You'll back away from people who challenge you. You'll avoid the environments where you might be forced to grow. And in the end, you'll say, see, I told you I couldn't do it. That's not failure. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy built on dishonesty. And don't think this is just about individuals. Entire cultures can start to rot from the inside. When truth is no longer valued, when everyone pretends, when mediocrity is defended, and excellence is mocked, when people stop asking hard questions because they're afraid of what the answers might demand from them. That's how civilizations decay. And it starts, always, with lies. So what does it take to live differently? It takes courage, not the loud kind, not the hero in the movie kind, but the quiet, persistent courage of someone who wakes up and says, I will not lie to myself today, even if that means admitting I've wasted time, even if it means owning up to failure, even if it means I have to change, radically. Because here's the thing, you cannot fix what you won't face. And if your version of reality is based on half-truths and self-serving stories, then every action you take, no matter how well-meaning, is built on sand. And people feel this. You feel it. You can sense when you're not living in alignment with the truth. It eats away at you. It makes you anxious. You start to fear silence, because in the silence the truth has a chance to speak. That's why people fill their days with noise and distraction. Because if they ever stop, if they ever really stop, they might have to confront just how far they've drifted from the life they were meant to live. And I'm not saying this to judge you. I'm saying it because it's the only way out. You want purpose. You want freedom. You want to actually live, instead of just exist. Then you have to tell the truth. Especially when it hurts, especially when it implicates you, especially when it ruins the stories you've used to justify your apathy. You have to stand in front of the mirror and say, I could be more, and then let that reality burn. Let it light a fire under every excuse you've built. Let it destroy the illusion that safety is found in comfort. It's not. It's found in honesty, in taking responsibility, in aligning your actions with what you know to be true, even when it costs you. So ask yourself, where have you been dishonest? Where have you let comfort dictate your standards? Where have you protected your ego at the expense of your potential? And most importantly, what would your life look like if you stopped lying completely? Because failure doesn't define you, not if you face it, but lying to yourself, that's something different. That will define you. That will become you. And it will do it so slowly, you won't even notice it happening, until one day, you look around and realize that the life you're living doesn't feel like yours anymore. It feels like a shell, a shadow, a well-polished version of what could have been. So whatever else you do, stop lying.
You want to talk about why you feel like you're stuck? Why nothing seems to change? No matter how many plans you make or how many times you say you'll start over, it's because change doesn't happen in ideas. It doesn't happen in emotion. It happens in action. You can talk about your dreams until your voice gives out, but if you don't align your behavior with your goals, nothing happens. You stay in the same place. And slowly, you start convincing yourself that you're failing, when in reality, you've just never truly begun. It's a hard thing to admit, especially when you're intelligent, capable, when you know somewhere inside that you were made for more. But knowing and doing are two entirely different things. People often mistake insight for transformation. They read books, listen to lectures, consume all this knowledge, and it feels like they're growing. And sure, that's a start, but knowledge isn't power unless it changes how you act. Otherwise, it just becomes a sophisticated way to procrastinate. You tell yourself you're failing because you're missing some key opportunity or some resource or some spark of motivation that everyone else seems to have. But the truth is, most of the time, you're not missing anything except the willingness to move, to take what you know, however small, and do something with it, even if it's clumsy, even if it's imperfect, even if it exposes your weaknesses, especially if it exposes your weaknesses, because that's the path forward. This is the tragic irony. People think they're failing because they're incapable, when in reality, they've just trained themselves to wait for ideal conditions. I'll start when I feel ready. I'll go all in when I have more time. I'll commit once I'm sure it'll work. But those ideal conditions never come. Life doesn't offer guarantees. It offers choices, and most people choose hesitation over and over again. Not because they're lazy, though some are, but because they're terrified of what action demands: exposure, vulnerability, effort, discipline. There's a kind of safety in planning. You get to feel productive without being accountable. You get to hold on to the fantasy of success without risking the reality of failure. But dreams that never meet action turn to resentment. And over time, you'll start to resent not just your situation, but yourself. That quiet, persistent guilt, that's your conscience trying to break through the fog of your inaction. It's the part of you that knows you were built for something more, calling out to the part of you that's hiding. If you want to stop lying to yourself, the first place you have to look is your behavior, not your intentions, not your emotions, your behavior. What are you actually doing day after day? Because that tells the truth about your values, not what you say matters to you, but what you're willing to sacrifice for. You can say you want to be healthy, but if you eat garbage and avoid exercise, then what you actually value is comfort. You can say you want a better career, but if you spend your evenings scrolling or numbing out, then what you really value is distraction. It's brutal to admit this, but it's also liberating, because once you see the gap between what you say and what you do, you have a chance, a real chance to do something about it. You can stop asking why you're failing and start asking why you're hesitating, why you're delaying, why you're waiting for permission. And more often than not, it comes down to fear. The fear that effort might not be enough. The fear that trying might reveal who you actually are, and what if who you are isn't enough. But let me tell you, the only way to find out what you're capable of is to test it, to try and fail, and try again. That's how every meaningful life is built, not through inspiration, but through endurance, through waking up on days when you feel nothing and doing it anyway, through making 1,000 tiny choices that nobody sees. Choices that slowly, almost invisibly, shape who you become. You're not failing, you're hesitating. And hesitation is a lie. It whispers to you that there's still time, that you'll feel ready soon, that next week will be different. But the clock is ticking. You don't get younger, you don't get more time. All you have is now, and the longer you delay, the more regret compounds. The more you practice inaction, the better you get at it, until it becomes your identity. And that is the most tragic failure of all, not that you couldn't, but that you wouldn't. So stop making promises to yourself that you never keep. Stop telling yourself you're going to change while repeating the same behavior. Stop pretending that a new version of you will emerge without any new actions to support it. Change doesn't happen by accident. It's earned. And the only way to earn it is to move, to do the thing, to take the risk, to start when it's inconvenient, when you're scared, when you don't feel like it. That's when it matters most. That's when it counts. Your future is not some far-off event waiting to unfold. It's being written right now in the choices you make today. And if your choices are cowardly, if they're passive, if they're built on fear or comfort or self-pity, then that's the future you'll inherit. Not because the world is unfair, but because you never aligned your actions with your intention. So stop hesitating. There comes a moment, if you're lucky, and I mean really lucky, when you realize the only thing standing between you and the life you want isn't fate or bad luck or even failure. It's you. It's your refusal to take radical responsibility for your existence. And that's a hard realization to stomach. It strips away your excuses. It exposes how many hours you've wasted. It confronts you with the terrifying truth that most of the time you haven't been powerless, you've just been passive. Most people don't fail because they lack intelligence or talent or opportunity. They fail because they've never actually taken full ownership of themselves. They live as if their life is happening to them, like they're passengers in a vehicle they're too afraid to drive. And when you live like that, it becomes easy, even comforting, to lie, to pretend that your lack of results is someone else's fault, your parents, your boss, society, anything but the one person you wake up with every morning and go to bed with every night. But responsibility, radical responsibility, means looking at your life and saying, this is mine, all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly, the habits you've formed, the relationships you've nurtured or neglected, the body you've built or failed to take care of, the time you've wasted, the lies you've told, and maybe worst of all, the truth you've avoided. It's all yours. Not because you're to blame for everything that's happened. Life is unfair. People are cruel. Pain comes uninvited. But because what you do with what happens is entirely your choice. That is your burden. That is your power. You see, people want freedom. They want meaning. They want to feel alive, but they want it without cost. They want the outcomes of a disciplined life without the discipline. They want the intimacy of a healthy relationship without the confrontation and the compromise. They want the fulfillment of achievement without the discomfort of sacrifice. But life doesn't work that way, and pretending it does is just another lie you tell yourself to avoid responsibility. You can't escape responsibility. That's the trick. You're always choosing. Even not choosing is a choice. You're responsible for how you respond to failure, to pain, to success, to temptation. And the sooner you stop outsourcing that responsibility, the sooner your life starts to take on weight and texture and depth. Because responsibility gives life structure. It puts boundaries around your behavior. It forces you to confront your values, not what you say you believe, but what your actions prove you believe. And don't confuse responsibility with blame. That's a dangerous trap. You can take responsibility for your healing without blaming yourself for your wounds. You can take responsibility for your growth without shaming yourself for where you started. That's what maturity looks like. It's the ability to hold pain in one hand and potential in the other and say both are real and I'm still going to move forward. Radical responsibility is the death of victimhood. And for some people, that's terrifying because they've spent so long identifying with their suffering that they don't know who they'd be without it. Their pain has become their story. Their bitterness has become their personality. And letting go of that, admitting that maybe they've played a role in their own stagnation, feels like betrayal. But it's not betrayal, it's liberation. When you take full responsibility, everything becomes actionable. You stop waiting for other people to change. You stop praying for circumstances to improve before you get your act together. You stop playing defense, and you start building strategically, intentionally, relentlessly. Not because it's easy, not because you're guaranteed success, but because the alternative, a life of quiet resentment, of wasted years, of potential never realized, is far more painful in the long run. And look, I'm not saying this is a one-time decision. Taking responsibility isn't something you do once and then coast. It's a daily discipline, a constant recalibration. Every day you wake up and ask yourself, what's in my control? What can I act on today, no matter how small that moves me toward the life I want? And then you do it, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. Because discipline isn't about how you feel, it's about what you value. And what you value is revealed in what you repeatedly choose. This doesn't mean you don't ask for help. It doesn't mean you isolate yourself or become some stoic robot. It means you stop expecting help to save you. You stop waiting for someone to come along and give you permission to grow. You stop confusing comfort with safety and start chasing the kind of discomfort that refines you, the kind that breaks you down so you can rebuild stronger, wiser, and more honest. There is nothing more powerful than a person who has stopped lying to themselves, stopped blaming the world, and taking full responsibility for who they are and who they're becoming. That's the person who's dangerous. That's the person who's free, because they can't be manipulated by shame. They're not paralyzed by guilt. They're not waiting for anyone to rescue them. They know the cost, and they've decided to pay it every day. That's how you change your life. Not by talking about it, not by hope, but by confronting it, taking hold of it, and dragging it, kicking and screaming, into alignment with what you know to be true. So take responsibility.